Joyce Hornady. You might say accuracy is my business. I make bullets.
You are listening to the Hornady Podcast.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in on this episode of the Hornady Podcast. I am your host, Seth, and today I've got a full table. To my left, Marketing Logistics Coordinator Matt Ritchie, and across the table, fellow marketeers, video guys, Preston Lentfer and Judd Jarzynka. Guys, thanks for coming around the table.
It's our pleasure.
Yeah. Welcome. Has anybody ever welcomed you to your podcast?
Well, it's not my podcast, but no, nobody's welcomed me, I don't think, to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for coming on.
Yeah. You know what? It is my pleasure. And in regard to the topic of the podcast, it really is an exciting time. And it is my pleasure to talk about this. This is something that we talk about year-round, and we don't give it much traction in the podcast because the podcast, we kind of pick topics that are topical at that time, right? Well, it's the last week of August, and that can mean only one thing. It's that hunting season is really near.
It's days away.
Days away in a lot of places.
It's going in some places right now.
In some places you got those alpine, those high country archery hunts for mule deers. We've got a couple of
South Carolina's rifle season is going right now, I believe.
Really?
It's a 3 or 4 month long season.
God dang.
Don't we have an early youth season, like doe season in Nebraska?
There is an early rifle season
Maybe
for antlerless. Is
it's
that
October?
Oh, in October. Okay.
Early to mid-October?
I want to say it's right around my birthday. So, like that second week there.
I'm not privy to that, but happy birthday.
There is.
Yeah, a couple months out. Well, let's talk more about that in that. So hunting season is here. We've got buddies dropping deer, getting text messages from people doing those alpine hunts with the bow.
You're probably going to be, I guess you're not hunting, but you're going to accompany a family member on a hunt. You have a September rifle elk tag.
Yep.
Your uncle does. Yep.
Uncle drew a bull elk tag for Nebraska. So once in a lifetime, 21st, I believe it's September is day one.
How many years did it take him to draw that tag?
Ooh, all of them. It's ever since they opened up the point system for the bull elk.
Yep.
He's been putting in.
That's awesome. Good for him, and I hope he has a great hunt. And I hope we all have a great fall. But this time frame where we're days away from seasons opening, archery seasons, and we're, some rifle seasons for like antelope, let's say, muzzleloader seasons for antelope, and we're getting closer and closer to the time that we all love to be in the woods, which is really that late October, November time frame. I mean, it's just magic. Doesn't matter what you're hunting. It's cold out. Everything's better when elk are bugling and the deer are running amok with the rut. And everybody has their own flavor, right? We all kind of like our different stuff for as far as how we like to hunt and where we like to hunt and how we like to do it. And the same is true for where we like to shoot an animal. And I feel like we all probably have slightly similar, but also slightly different backgrounds in what brought us into hunting and how we hunted growing up. And, there's a couple around the table that have way more of an archery background than some of us. And I feel like that probably has some weight in your shot placement selection. And I would just like to discuss this a little bit further. And I feel like it's a topic that our listeners can dive into. And, we're not going to tell you guys as listeners what to do. But this point of this one is just to talk about what we do and why we maybe do what we do. So, that topic has been beaten many, many times. And there's a lot that goes into it. You can't really say dyed in the wool, I only shoot this shot location because there's not many people that, one, have that discipline to do so. And two, there's a lot of complexity to it. What bullet are you shooting? What cartridge are you shooting? What's the muzzle velocity and what's the impact velocity? And again, very dynamic. So who wants to start with maybe your background? Kick it across the table to one of you guys. What's your background in hunting and what was your shot placement then? Your preferred shot placement? Maybe some of the dogma that you heard about shot placement. And then what do you guys do now?
Yeah, I can kick it off.
Mr. Jarzynka.
Yeah, I guess to start it off with, my centerfire rifle hunting, started at, 13, 14, whenever you could shoot a deer, and maybe a couple of years after that. But anyway,
with the Savage.
With the 243.
Yeah.
So I was shooting, I think the first 3 deer I took with that rifle, I was shooting just 100 grain interlock. yeah, thinking back on that now, my shot placement, I was a new hunter, so ideally I was going right behind the shoulder, and
Is that because of an error margin, perhaps, or that
what
was
your
just
old
what
man
you were
told
told?
you, or-
that's
You just-
what you do. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know. My dad wasn't much of a big game hunter. A lot of upland in his day when pheasants were everywhere around here, but no, I don't know. That's just what you did. I don't know if I picked that up in a hunter safety class or what, but yeah, with that 100 grain interlock, I don't know if I put much thought into that at the time, but now, okay, yeah, I'll shoot him behind the shoulder with that bullet and it'll do just fine. It'll do great.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably 16, 17 years old, I did some archery hunting. That's when I picked up archery. So there, even more kind of solidified. I was aiming behind the shoulder with that. And I think, on deer size game, that's just what I've done. I've
Mhm.
always shot behind the shoulder. And let's see, I was probably early 20s when I got my 7 mag. So I moved up a little bit, shot that 7 mag. And I shot 162s.
ELDXs?
Yep, ELDXs with that for a long time. I did shoot 150 grain GMX out of that 7 mag on a deer hunt in South Dakota. And that may be one of the only that I can think of that I did take an upper shoulder shot on that mule deer, and yeah, stoned him. It just dropped him right down. But otherwise, I'd say, I don't know where I picked up the behind the shoulder, but that's just kind of what I've always tried to do. Most times, luckily, I've been fortunate and it's gone that way. But yeah, I'm a behind the shoulder guy.
Now, is there a thought process about meat damage to that, or is it mainly, I know that's a straight line into the pump house?
Yeah. I mean, just the way my mind works, whether it's right, wrong, indifferent, I just feel like, the margin of error. If I'm trying to aim in the center of the lungs, heart area, if I'm left or right, up or down, I have a little bit more leeway shooting there probably. But
Okay.
yeah, I would say, on deer size game, antelope and whitetail mule deer that I've taken, that's kind of always been my shot. And, I've seen some nice deer in my day going back, that I've busted and kicked out. And it's just, I'm not anywhere near skilled enough to take a running shot. So it's got to be, I try to make it as perfect as I can make it in that scenario. So as much of a broadside shot that I can get, stationary standing critter, I like.
They've shot a big Colorado bull elk before, right? What was that one about? Because
With
now
the
you're
old 7
talking
mag, yeah.
another echelon, another
Yeah.
size of game.
So that one was kind of unique. I'm trying to think, if I had any thought or conversation with anybody beforehand about shot placement on that, and I don't really recall it. So I think I went in, and where I hit that elk was, right behind the shoulder, but the elk is so big. The first shot, the elk was probably, dead on its feet,
Yeah,
but it was
lethal
still
hit.
standing.
Yeah.
So yeah, we kept shooting, and I think I put 2 in that. And again, he was probably done on the first one, but if he presents me the shot still and he's standing, I'm not risking losing that critter. So
Yeah, especially on an elk.
yeah, and that was 162 LDXs too. I've got a mushroom that we pulled out of that bowl still sitting on the desk in the office, so that's kind of neat. The only other time I've taken somewhat of a different shot was in Illinois. I was hunting with Greg Ritz out there.
Yeah.
With the muzzleloader.
With the muzzleloader, and that was with the original board driver. I think
290
that wasn't
grain.
with the ELDX, and a big old whitetail, the biggest I've been fortunate enough to get, walked into like 30 yards, and was looking kind of at us, past us. There was deer running all over that morning, but anyway, 30 yards, kind of quartering to. And with that big old bullet at that distance, I didn't even question it. I let it rip on that deer right in the
Square,
chest. And they got that shot on camera in slow motion, and the ripples that go through the body of that deer were unreal. So yeah, that was probably one of the only other times I've taken, for me, an unusual type shot. Otherwise, I like a stationary critter as close to broadside as I can get and shooting behind the shoulder.
And
That's fair.
I want to maybe just throw in here too, like people talk about energy a lot, and this is probably not the podcast for that, but you've got a 290 grain bullet at almost muzzle velocity. That's a lot of energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you put it in the pump house, that deer still ran off because his central nervous system was not disrupted.
Yeah.
So it's not an energy thing, in my opinion.
Well, he ran off, but it was all downhill to to a smack and a roll. But the neat thing too, on my desk as well, we found the expanded bullet on that too, and it dumped a lot of energy.
I just think that people think that dumping energy or energy into an animal equates to it dropping, and that is not how that works.
It's where
just
it's
more shot placement.
Yeah, it's 100%. Yeah.
You got to disrupt the central nervous system for him to go down immediately.
Utilize your space your way with the modular Hornady Security Square Lock Organizing System. Mount the Square Lock panels anywhere in your home or shop. Then attach the wide assortment of Square Lock accessories to securely store firearms, tools, gear, or any other valuables in any possible configuration. Keep your reloading bench or gun room organized with the Square Lock Modular Organizing System from Hornady Security.
I really like the way you laid that out, Judd, that it really wasn't for, meat preservation. It was probably something where you heard an old timer say it, or the hunter safety. I know when I took hunter safety, that was what they instructed, was you shoot behind the shoulder. And then obviously in the archery world, that's the honey hole right there. And it's just what you've done, it's what you know, and it's worked. And quite simply, it does work. You put a bullet in the right spot behind the shoulder, it's going to work for sure.
Well, yeah, this probably isn't a reason, but man, isn't a blood trail fun though?
It is fun.
I mean, I don't want to say that.
I mean,
if I can see the animal go down, ideally, that's what I would prefer.
Yeah, but even if I know where the animal is, I'm still following the blood trail.
Blood trails are just fun.
They can be, yeah.
Oh yeah, they can. They can not be sometimes too.
Yeah. Yep. All right, Preston, over to you now.
Oh, my turn.
Yeah, we're sticking on that side of the table.
I would say I started hunting as soon as I could with a rifle, a 270, shooting 130 grain interlocks. But I guess the reason I did that, at a younger age, Realtree Monster Bucks Volume 8 showed up as a Christmas present for one of our family members, and I can't tell you how many times I played that and rewound it.
1998.
And rewound it. Like, it was burned into my brain. That was the first time I saw T-Bone.
Oh,
But, so yeah, watching that, there wasn't a whole lot of deer just dropping. There was a lot of behind the shoulder shots. I read a book called Whitetail Deer growing up, and I don't know if shot placement was talked about a whole lot there, but biggest margin of error, biggest point of the vitals on a broadside shot is behind the shoulder. And then as I grew up a few years, I got into archery pretty heavy, and that's all I did for a while. And behind the shoulder shot there, and I was shooting. I wouldn't say that every shot I ever took was perfectly broadside. There was a couple of instances where they were actually quartering to me, and I shot right through the shoulder. And that's another topic for debate on a different podcast other than ours, but that was a fixed blade broadhead quartering to, and I took the shot, and it's worked out thus far. You've been preaching high shoulder shots. Let's not say preaching. Preaching might be the wrong word.
Yeah, I think
but
so.
An advocate. That's what you like to do. And I think I've taken one of those shots ever at a mule deer at 200 yards with a muzzleloader, and it just dropped immediately. It was fantastic. He was about to crest a hill, not skylined or anything, folks. Come on now. But he was about to go over a hill, and I didn't know what was on the other side of that hill. So I would have rather had a downhill drag other than back up, whatever have you. And you'd been preaching that or advocating for it, saying that's what you like to do. So I gave it a try, and it worked phenomenally. But been behind the shoulder for as long. We went on the antelope hunt.
Yeah,
And you said put it on the shoulder, and it didn't work in my brain. My brain just said it goes behind the shoulder, and a heart shot him. I couldn't help it.
Yep.
So behind the shoulder for me, not opposed,
right.
To a high shoulder shot, especially with the right critter and the right bullet.
Mm-hmm.
If I've got a CX in my arsenal, or even an ELDX on the right size game, and a deer or an elk or whatever needs to drop, I'd like to try to do it, but for some reason my brain doesn't really work that way.
Yep. And that was interesting specifically on that antelope hunt because we'd had, I don't know, maybe 12 hours on the road to get to where we were hunting. We drove across the width of Wyoming. We went from eastern Idaho to the furthest east township of Wyoming in one day. Good long haul. Got there, and on that trip, as we're driving, we talked about shot placement. And when you're hunting the areas that we were hunting on that particular hunt, like these antelope, they can run forever and ever and ever. And there's not a lot of places that we want them to run off of the public land that we were hunting. And so we got set up on this shot. Beautiful area, kind of a wing and a prayer type of scenario. But yeah, got in there, used the terrain feature, set up on the shot, 300 yards with the 6.5 PRC. I mean, just a chip shot. And I think I said to him while I'm looking through the glass, like, Preston, put it on his shoulder. And he shot, and the antelope takes off at, the speed of sound, just
right behind a little terrain
obviously
feature.
Didn't make it very far because it was just an absolutely perfect heart shot.
Yeah. And that's one of those things, too. Like, I would have liked to have dropped him because where he stood, I knew he was on public ground. But we were not that far from the boundary. Private.
If you rewind that scenario back just a little bit right before I was looking through the spotter and said, Preston, put it on his shoulder, we were both on Onyx going, okay, I can see that tree. And that tree is 397 yards. So, okay, we're good.
Yeah. So it was very close. And I don't know. And I'm sure you'll have a story here coming up that folks may have heard on this podcast about public versus private and dropping an animal. But I think I'm done. I said I said my piece.
Yeah. Well, we'll circle back to this to see where that line in the sand becomes very much a gray line. But Matt, let's hear from you.
So my background is more like Judd's. I didn't. My dad wasn't much of a hunter growing up. He didn't get us into it. Got into it after hunter safety and started, upland and then into, as you like to put it, the North American songbird slam, that kind of stuff. But
running around the farm with a pellet gun.
As I got into high school and got around some other kids that were more into deer hunting, things like that, that's when I started. And my first gun that I used took my old man's 22-250, and I don't even remember what bullet it was. I know it was a Hornady bullet, but yeah. And so I was always behind the shoulder shot because that's what you learn, and that's what it was taught to me. And yeah, I've killed a few deer there and always had, again, echo what these guys say, it's the largest margin of error. But the more I've gotten into it and the more deer I've killed, I'm whatever shot presents itself. If it's a high shoulder shot and I don't want that deer to leave the where it's standing, then I'm going to take it. If it's a quartering 2, this last winter I shot a doe quartering 2. It's just the one that presented itself. It was cold and I was cold and daylight was running out, and I was not gonna not fill that tag. So, but it comes down to understanding your equipment and even the anatomy of the animal, how that animal works, and where his joints are at, and where his vitals are at, and that kind of stuff. So, and then now I teach that. I pass that on to my kids. So I coach them up really well. They're really good on the gun, being good trigger pull, breathing, all that stuff. But it just and they understand what an animal looks like internally and why we put our shots where we put it. Like, look at the heart here. See this big hole, or this lung is evaporated, guys. See, that's why we
little anatomy lesson.
And not to be grotesque or anything, but that's how they learn.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I want to pass on. I want them to want to be efficient and ethical, and so I'm whatever presents itself.
You're indiscriminate.
Yeah, indiscriminate shot placement, but I make it count too. So
yeah, absolutely.
Well, you got me thinking of something as you were talking, like knowing your gear, knowing your equipment. That's probably something that I can, ride on now. Of when I started, coming from, not knowing, I can't even tell you how many years I hunted before I bought a set of shooting sticks. It's like, well, I got a knee and an elbow. I'm good enough to go. So, just working through those things. Did you watch any outdoor television?
Oh, yeah. I mean, my parents got me a subscription to Field and Stream and Outdoor Life, and then like the Monster Bucks. I've still got those DVDs, and I watch them every once in a while. So
Yeah.
But yeah, we did. We definitely did. So
I probably got to credit that too. I'm trying to think of what shows I watched or, what it was. I can't really recall. Honestly, Mark Kaiser had a show when I was younger. And again, I started hunting a little later. I was in my mid-teens. But yeah, I watched a lot of Mark Kaiser, and he's really good at kind of describing scenarios and walking through his hunts and what he does. So I would say he's one that I've probably watched when I was trying to get into the hunting game. But I'd probably credit a lot to outdoor television too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, social media wasn't a thing back
social
when
media
I
wasn't
was
a thing.
growing
We
up.
both-
So
We definitely didn't have the outdoor channel, so mine was all DVDs. But you
Yeah.
can guarantee every time I was at Walmart, I was in the outdoor section
Yeah.
seeing if the new monster bucks was in there.
That's awesome. Judd, you mentioned that you started hunting later, so than some of these guys, and you were in your mid-teens.
wow.
Yeah.
When you zoom out, right? Like there's
Yeah.
probably a lot of hunters that don't start hunting until their 20s or 30s or, older than that. I've got a good friend of mine that lives in Elkhorn, Nebraska, so a big urban area, and didn't grow up with hunting. And he's in his 40s and he's hook, line, and sinker now, and he's all about it.
Yeah.
But it took, a bunch of friends that grew up passionate about it and just kind of rubbed off on him enough that he got into it too. So you say it like you were kind of late to the game, man. In the grand scheme of things, you started at ground zero like everybody else.
Well, yeah, definitely. Being here at Hornady, you're still immersed in it.
Yeah.
Like Joe Thielen, the engineer, doesn't he take his daughters to Missouri
Mhm.
because the hunting age is even
There
younger
is, I'm not sure
over
there is
there?
a hunting age.
Yeah, and the
It's
tags
6
are
or 7 or 8.
incredibly affordable.
So yeah, I'm not exactly sure how old his youngest daughter is, but it's like, yeah, he's
He gets it
taking
to
them
him
there
early.
to go early. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's true. I guess
Yeah,
probably still got an early start.
that's true. Well, I started this is carbon copy, I think, of all 4 of us here. Did the hunter safety.
Hello, an
Yeah.
echo chamber?
Yeah, right. And my dad was a hunter growing up, primarily an archer. He did rifle hunt a lot before I was born. I was the youngest of 3. And mainly that was feeding family, right? That was what we were doing. We ate deer meat almost exclusively for a good portion of my younger life. And then he kind of hung the rifles up and went almost strictly to archery. And that was, I'm guessing, a little bit more cathartic, slower paced, a little more enjoyable. And so I grew up shooting a bow, with Dad in the backyard at 6, 7 years old and shooting the BB gun and, take hunter safety. And so him being primarily an archer by the time I was old enough to hunt, you put your 257 Roberts crosshairs right behind the shoulder and let him have it. And so I didn't question that. That's what we learned in hunter safety. It's what Dad's been preaching to me, and so that's what I did. And just like you guys have been saying, a good bullet right behind the shoulder just works every time. I never did drop any deer in their tracks doing that, but that definitely was my go-to shot placement. And I got into archery a little bit. Shot a deer here in 2012 was the last deer I shot with the bow. So I'm pretty far removed from the archery game. But was behind the shoulder up until that point. Once I started work at Hornady, I was still very much a behind the shoulder shooter. That was the primary goal. Just like you said, Judd, I'm looking for a broadside shot right behind the shoulder at a traditional distance. And as my marksmanship and riflemanship skills evolved, and the line of demarcation for me was when I stopped hunting private property as the primary hunting source. When I started hunting other areas, just exploring. And I know you guys do a bunch of this too. When you're just, you young and restless, and I want to go hunt out there. Let's see what that place has to offer. And so you go do that. And for me, that was when it really changed, because Onyx, I didn't have that at the time early on. And even when I did get it, which would have been like probably the second hunt I ever went on public land, you pull up the landowner information, and it's like, oh, that landowner lives in Dallas, Texas. Cool. So, I hope he doesn't get over there kind of deal. And so at that point, there had been, now we're 2012, 13 timeframe, 14 timeframe. Now there's more social media, and there's other, television shows out there that were advocating the high shoulder shot. I'd never shot anything in the high shoulder in my life. And once I started doing that, I quickly became a believer, specifically in the areas where you can't afford for them to make it a single step, jump the fence, 20 yards, 30 yards, whatever it is. I need them anchored on the spot. And that's where I went to that shot placement. And now, regardless of where I'm hunting, if I'm hunting back home on, private property or somebody's farm, I still find myself going high shoulder, put them down in their tracks. And that might be a hard switch to flip for me to go backward unless I pick up the stick and string again.
What was the first one? Was that the mule deer on public land?
Yep.
400 and change?
17.
Yep.
But 417. And that was a good example of I can see the private property boundary and I can see the animal that I want to kill. I know where he's at. To say I was confident in the setup, prone, the best gear I could afford at the time, which was really good equipment, everything dialed in, not a single doubt in my mind that I can make this shot, and put it through the high shoulder, and he went down where he stood, and that was like, okay, yep, I'm gonna be doing this from now on.
Yeah.
And then fast forward, I mentioned my dad being an archer primarily, and he was behind the shoulder, decades worth of shooting that way, and then I kind of got him back into rifle hunting, started building him some custom rifles and taking him out west to do some hunts, and mainly western Nebraska, but some other states. And last year we got a chance at an amazing mule deer, public land. Everything came together kind of last second. It was a big flurry of, oh crap, can you get a shot? No, can't see them. Where are they at? They're moving. And then we finally get a shot. And all the deer that were in this group are jumping the fence onto private property. And then he was the last one to come through. And 40 or 50 yards away from the fence, stopped for a moment, and Dad zipped one through both shoulders and bounced his chin off the ground faster than his feet.
Do you think if you didn't remind him, he would have done it anyway?
I hope. I don't know, honestly. Because, yeah, in that situation, to paint it out a little deeper for you, Dad's prone on the gun at, I should remember the range, but I don't.
It was 450 or something.
I want to say 451 comes to mind. Proned out, deer broadside, standing, and I reminded him right before he shot, Dad put it on the shoulder. Dad put it on the shoulder, and I just said it over and over until he fired. And, through both shoulder blades. And while the whole herd of deer are on that private field, that deer's anchored on public ground, and it was just a success. So for me, I feel like that's really important because I don't want to have to deal with the subsequent find the landowner, maybe get a hold of game warden if we need to.
Yeah.
Just don't have to deal with that.
Sometimes it doesn't turn out. I've heard horror stories.
Exactly.
I don't know. I'm convinced now though, because I'm thinking like I some of the stuff I hunt's right on the river, and that river's not always froze in November.
No.
Like I don't want that deer getting down on that river.
Mm-hmm.
I'm anchoring him. So
yeah.
Find the latest shirts, hats, hoodies, and accessories that you see here on the podcast and much more at HornadyGear.com.
I think what Matt said, and before we started this podcast, Judd alluded to it as well. I think, one, knowing your equipment, knowing your bullet and your cartridge and velocity, which we can kind of go into some deeper details here, that's really important because then you become a target of opportunity. Is it quartering towards me? Is he quartering away? High shoulder, behind the shoulder? Doesn't matter. You're well equipped and educated enough to make those shot selections.
Yeah, that's a big deal. On that antelope, I haven't taken really far shots. I feel like I'm fairly proficient. I've shot a few competitions. I'm not very good at it, but proficient enough that like the PRS skill stage, for an example. If you guys don't know what that is, it's typically a 400-yard, 10-inch circle that you have to shoot off of 4 positions, and routinely I'll clean that in a relatively quick time, not burning it down like everybody else. But that's 10 inches might be a little big for a deer's vitals, but
yeah,
when you're smacking the center of it in a relatively quick time, I think you've got things figured out a little bit. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. But you become a proficient marksman.
You become a proficient marksman. You practice with your equipment that you're taking to the field. It matters, because if there is a quartering shot and maybe you have a little thinner bullet or whatever have you, and you want to fish it in between that front shoulder, that instead of going through the shoulder, you can do that. I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, having an accurate rifle. Yep,
you as an accurate shooter.
Yep. That's very true. So from a bullet standpoint, what are you guys shooting for bullets, and how does that dictate your shot placement? Primarily shooting, because we shoot a little bit of everything.
Well, on that antelope, that was right after a writer's event, and we were showing off the 130 grain CX bullet in the outfitter line in the 6.5 PRC. So I was using that, and I would have shot him at any angle, quite frankly.
That CX bullet is just going to penetrate, no question.
Routinely 32, 36 inches of penetration in ballistics, FBI, real gelatin, none of that clear stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff that stinks a little bit. But, yeah, I mean, it works at, I'd be confident in saying I would shoot an elk through the shoulder with that bullet.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I really, and of any flavor of CX as well. Those are just so robust bullets.
They're just
incredible.
Beautiful when they mushroom perfectly. It's like if
you
you dream about a bullet
yeah.
mushrooming, that's what a CX does. It's just a
so
perfect.
Uniform and it's beautiful. But other than that, I've been shooting ELDX for years.
Yeah,
it's just an accurate bullet. You could go shoot a match with it. We've shot matches with it. I've shot matches with it. And when I hit a deer in the vitals, it's not let me down.
Yeah.
Judd, what are you shooting primarily?
I would say this may get us on another tangent, but I've shot GMXs at the time, now CXs. I've shot interlocks. I've shot ELDXs. I've shot a lot, and I'm still, my ideal shot is behind the shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you talk about different critters,
let's change that up.
Now my shot placement maybe changes a little bit when you get into something like predators or pigs.
Yeah, prairie dogs behind the shoulder.
Yeah,
right underneath the head.
Yeah. I don't know. I would say definitely when you switch to coyotes. For some reason, I kind of tend to go more neck area almost on a coyote.
Yeah, coyote. You heart shoot a coyote and it'll run. It'll run for a long time too.
Yeah. So here, this might be controversial. So with a big game animal, like Judd talked about, waiting, being patient to really get that shot angle the way you want. If I get a shot at a coyote, I'm going to do everything I can do to put one in the vitals. But I'm putting a bullet in the air, whether it's like climbing a hill and I can only see its back or something. I'm getting a bullet out there.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about that?
I'm fine with it. I mean,
yeah, me too.
The amount of coyotes that I have on my trail camera is just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
I literally routinely I'll see deer running across the camera, and then a coyote's following them. It's not ideal.
Yeah.
Used to have turkeys on the place that I hunt a little bit, and not anymore.
Yeah.
I don't. Now that you said that, that is kind of a comparison that I'll make. I might be crazy for doing it, but my experiences in the coyotes I've shot and the turkeys I've shot with a bow are pretty dang similar. Those things are hard to stop.
Mm-hmm. With an arrow.
And I'm just saying,
shot placement.
In general, maybe that's just vitals or
being
small.
Smaller.
But a coyote, man, coyotes can take a beating and go a long ways, like Matt said, and the turkeys I've shot with a bow can do the same thing.
You have to go give them a beating.
I may say something controversial. A turkey deserves to be shot with a shotgun shell upside the head.
Oh, yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you there.
Fair enough.
Hey, before we get off on too much of a tangent, folks in the comments, drop down, write us, where do you like to shoot an animal? What kind of animals are you shooting? Do you have any limitations, and what are you shooting them with?
Yeah.
We want to know.
And what's your reasoning? I was anticipating that somebody would say meat damage. For me, I like to shoot in the high shoulder. Meat damage is really not a concern, and I'm not trying to be wasteful, but in a lot of cases I can't afford for that animal to go anywhere, and I'll feed some bloodshot meat to my dog before I let that animal jump the fence.
What's more wasteful? A little piece of meat this big, bullet size hole on both shoulders, or that deer going across the fence and you never getting it?
Yeah.
Because that could happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if that landowner is living who knows where.
Yep. And that's pretty common, especially out here in western Nebraska, get these big chunks of land. Landowner is in Texas or something.
Yep.
So you said, Judd, that you tend to favor more shoulder neck area on a coyote. What about a pig?
Pig, I'm actually the same way.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm shooting for the neck area as well, trying to anchor it as quick as I can. Yeah, I'm trying to think. We shot CXs on the last pig trip I went. Took a 6.5 Creedmoor. Preston hand loaded those bullets up for me. Shot
same-
real great. I think.
Same bullets that my wife shot an elk with.
Yeah, 2 pigs I think went down on that trip with that load. First trip though, I shot 143 LDXs, same rifle, and now that I'm thinking back on it, the 2 CX shots were neck shots. I don't know if it's just the way it played out on my first trip down there, but that shot was behind the shoulder. And the crazy thing, I've heard this, bullet selection here nor there. Pigs are just, it's hard to get a good blood trail on a pig.
They're tough, yeah. A lot of thick skin.
And that shot was double lung through and through, hole on both sides, and it was tough trailing that sucker. I mean, luckily, he only made it maybe 40, 50 yards, but yeah, there was not much blood. I think just a lot of fat.
Yeah, I don't know what it's called on a pig, but under their skin, they've got like a layer of sinew on their rib cages and stuff. That I don't know. Did that lead to it? Did that make it so he didn't have a blood trail?
Probably. Yeah. Hard to say, but
yeah. I think for me, I'm not a hard and fast. I always have to shoot him in the high shoulder. That's my preferred shot. But if I haven't been presented this in a while, barring this last trip to Africa, which I shot half the things on the shoulder and half the things not on the shoulder, but their vitals on African plains game is just in a little bit different area than a North American big game animal. But where I was going with that was I like to shoot ELDX bullets, just like Preston said. They're accurate, and that to me says a lot. I will, like I think Jaden's mentioned it, that he won't trade accuracy. You won't trade that raw dispersion just for velocity. And I'm the same way. I want match accuracy if I can get it so that I'm properly prepared to take a shot at any practical range. And here with the 7mm PRC or the 6.5 PRC, high velocity at the muzzle, right? Those are high performance cartridges. So if I was going to shoot something, say, 250 yards and in, I would consciously have to tell myself, keep that off the shoulder, put that behind the shoulder blade, simply because that velocity hasn't had a chance to decay. That muzzle velocity is so quick. Those bullets are so efficient. They're going to be impacting with all that velocity. And as we've discussed on the terminal performance episode of this podcast, velocity makes bullets work. And I wouldn't want to sacrifice some penetration on a lead core bullet simply by impacting with high muzzle velocity squarely on the shoulder blade. As the velocity decays 300 yards and beyond, that's when I'll go to that high shoulder. But again, I haven't been presented with that anytime here in the recent past that I can think of. But
yeah, it's just food for thought. If you look at a sectioned ELDX bullet, very, very aggressive taper from the base being very thick
on the jacket.
Yep, and you'll have just heard about this in the ELDX podcast, to a high interlock, to a very, very, very thin ogive, and that's what makes it able to work at those long distances.
Is that thin ogive jacket?
Thin ogive jacket tapering down to thick. That's what's making it fine to use at darn near point blank range.
It's kind of a dual bullet, and with the CX offering, I've shot a few of those. I don't shoot those as my primary go-to bullet, but in the animals I've taken with the CX, I go to that shoulder every time simply because that bullet thrives on velocity, and the more medium I can hit that's going to push that bullet open and drive that expansion, the better. So I want high velocity, and I want shoulder blade with the CX if I can get it.
In my experience, it's been 2 animals that I've seen taken with the CX, that cow elk that my wife shot and that antelope that I shot. On the elk, I thought for sure, an elk's wide, and this was a cow, so it was huge. I've never seen an elk up close like that before. It was really, really neat. Just a huge critter. I thought for sure we'd get that bullet.
Trucked right through.
Right on through.
6.5 Creedmoor.
Top of the heart, just off.
Mission accomplished. Good job, Preston's wife.
Well, yeah. Great shot on her part. We had gone out to the range and made sure that she was proficient as well. And then, I was impressed by the CX. It's not my primary either. Would not hesitate if it was a requirement for a hunt for whatever reason.
Excellent.
How about coyotes for you, Matt?
Yeah, Matt, Mr. Coyote over here.
You know what? I'm a match bullet or a VMAX bullet, but probably leaning more towards the VMAX. I got a little hot rod 6mm 6 Remington Ackley that I shoot 87 grain VMAX bullets out of at the speed of sound.
But where do you like to shoot them? Anywhere?
Yeah, whatever. I'm very opportunistic. Whatever
Well,
one is available.
Judd and Matt coming from a more of a cattle-centric type
Yeah.
of background and work history, and coyotes are a thing. You
You
gotta get a
have a
bullet in
range
them.
gun. You got to have a pickup gun. You got to have that, you know.
Yeah.
So when you're out, checking water or looking for thistles or, putting out salt, if there's a coyote, he's getting some lead slung at him. So, but yeah, really, I mean, obviously, if it's a broadside shot, I'm putting it on the shoulder and just,
Break 'em
anchoring
down.
him. But if that sucker's getting away, he's getting a bullet
Somewhere.
somewhere. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and I suppose an
So-
87 grain VMAX at 1,000,000 feet per second tends to do some damage no matter where you hit them.
Yeah.
I would venture to say you put Matt in that rifle anywhere up to and including 1 mile of a coyote, it's in trouble. Now, 1 mile's an exaggeration, folks.
Yeah.
That's a movie quote.
But other than that though, I'm an ELDX guy. The 143s, 103s, they've always done well for me. So
Excellent. Yeah, that ELDX for, not that this is just an ELDX podcast, but gosh, it's so forgiving. You can make do your best effort to put it in the right place, and things happen. And that bullet is very forgiving. If you're slightly far back, you're going to get the penetration. Or if you plant one on the shoulder blade, it's got that really thick jacket that Preston mentioned. It really holds together well. Plenty for, obviously, you shot an elk with it, Judd. It's a good bullet out of the old 7 mag. Just a really good bullet, and shot placement, although important, and is in the hierarchy of things, that's thing number 1 is shot placement. That ELDX bullet allows you quite a bit of air budget, if you will.
Yep. And we've looked at a lot of high-speed gel shots with ELDX bullets, and they are just impressive. The amount of temporary wound cavity is huge. Permanent wound cavity is great, and a lot of times that ELDX is squeaking through the back of the block just a little bit.
Yeah, they're probably right behind my 53 grain VMAX.
Well, that's
that's
your bullet. That's your bullet. Well, that or a 95.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
Agree.
I hate to say it. I like the 95. I don't know if I've ever killed anything with it. But
Well,
the 53s
But
and
you
the
made
223.
sure that we loaded that.
Yeah.
That was great.
Power and performance in the palm of your hand. Hornady Handgun Hunter Ammunition. Built around the tough copper alloy Monoflex handgun bullet that features a proprietary elastomer tip, deep penetration, and high weight retention. Handgun Hunter Ammunition. As rough and rugged as the conditions and game demand.
Well, and like I was mentioning about coyotes, and not to make this about ELDXs and coyotes, but you were talking about how prevalent the numbers are getting and how the turkeys are going down. And in our lifetime, growing up and up into including just a couple of years ago, turkeys were a borderline nuisance in large parts of the state of Nebraska. Certainly where I grew up, they were just everywhere. And I manage a lease that used to roost 300 to 400 turkeys per winter on less than 900 acres. I mean, there was a pile of them. And then with the way that the fur trade is gone, raccoons and coyotes really aren't worth any money, and the incentive to trap and hunt them has gone down to, unless you're just doing it for fun, there's really not a whole lot of incentive to do it. And, not to, we talked about the cattle thing, but just on your big game and your wild game, pheasants and turkeys and
Fawns
deer,
and-
fawns.
Yeah.
If you're a big game hunter, you should be actively shooting predators like coyotes and other varmint like raccoons when you can.
Yeah, and not to make this about coyotes, but the more coyotes you shoot, the healthier the rest of them are.
That's true. Yeah, you'll
Just a
never.
fact.
That's like a cockroach. You can never extinguish them. You can never kill too many of them. You'll never do it. And like you said, they tend to get healthier, and they have, less territory and less disease.
Less disease, more food.
Well,
Yeah.
they're fun to hunt too. And I can't remember going back when we had Jeff Nimnick on. I can't remember if he said it on our podcast or I heard him say it on a different podcast. But his thing was he was kind of making a move to, all hunters should be a coyote hunter, should be a predator hunter, or should at least try it. Because in his opinion, and I somewhat agree with him, a really good coyote hunter that's efficient at killing coyotes is an exceptional deer hunter, because coyotes are so stinking smart.
Yep.
Play the wind, they do everything that a deer
Eyesight,
does.
wind.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was his thing, and I haven't really thought about that, but I think there's some weight to that. A good predator hunter is most likely a really good, deer hunter.
Yeah, that's a good point, because not only do they use the wind and their eyesight, they also have the intangible of some sort of instinctual, there's no way he saw me, there's no way he smelled me, there's no way he saw my truck, there's no way nothing. And at 600 yards, he was coming right in, then stopped and went parallel to me and looked right at me and trotted off into the trees. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, who knows?
That's when you get that 87 at Mach 7.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going on a thermal kick here too, just from my experience, and maybe people have had a different experience, but I've done the thermal thing just a couple of years now, and from what I've found, you can see deer in a field and walk, within 100 yards, 50, whatever yards of them, and they hardly even look at you. I've seen some coyotes, at a couple 100 yards away, and I don't know if they just pay more attention or more wary.
Tailing out
but
of here.
yeah, they do not put up with it. If they see you, even in the dark, if there's a little bit of moonlight, gone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if they're just what it is, but they're tough to hunt.
That's a good point. So this was a podcast about shot placement and getting us excited about hunting season because it's coming up here. But if you're listening and you're not out there trying to shoot some predators or some fur harvest varmint, stuff like that,
Let me know.
yeah, Judd
I'll be
will
there.
come on out. But realistically, you should be doing that. It's better for the deer. It's better for the turkeys. It's better for everything to get that population properly managed. And it's fun, and it makes you a better hunter. There's nothing wrong with that. And with that, guys, do you have anything else you want to add to shot placement before this devolves?
I think it already did.
In a good way.
Yeah. No, it's just that time of year, man. It's getting close. Our customers are starting to ask more questions related to bullet selection and cartridge selection, and hunts are coming up and gear questions. And man, guys, in the comments, let us know your shot placement. Like Preston mentioned, we'd be curious to hear where you like to shoot them and why. That's the big one for me. Is I'd like to know a little bit of backstory.
And does it vary on size of animal?
Sure.
Give us your great comments. We love your feedback. Like to see it.
Yeah, I'm interested in that, because just thinking here tonight on my way home, I think it's something good to think about now after having this conversation. Just run some scenarios through in my head as I'm driving home tonight. Okay, a critter facing this way, or a coyote, or a deer doing this, doing that. I might just run some scenarios through so I'm ready when that moment finally happens, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I can be successful.
Awesome. Guys, well, with that, I wish you the best of luck on the fall hunts. Hopefully your shot placement is true, and you guys get some notch tags. Preston, I know you got an elk tag coming up here, and looking forward to going on that one with you. And I know, man, between archery and rifle and muzzleloader season, it's going to be a busy fall, and I'm looking forward to sharing this time of year with you guys. So thanks for coming on the show and talking shot placement.
Hunting season's back. This is great.
Guys, hopefully you enjoyed this episode about shot placement. And this is just our opinion. It's like everything else. It's what we like to do. And let us know what you like to do, where you like to put that bullet to make it count. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you on the next one.